The first winter storm arrived 2 weeks earlier than anyone in Elk Ridge expected. Snow fell hard across the Wyoming hills, covering fences, trails, and lonely cabins beneath thick white drifts. The wind screamed through the pine trees without stopping, carrying sharp ice that stung like tiny knives. Most families had prepared enough wood and food to wait out the storm. But on a forgotten piece of land high above the valley, one small cabin had almost nothing left. Clara Bennett sat beside a weak iron stove that had gone cold before sunrise. Only 2 broken fence boards remained beside it, and she knew they would burn for less than an hour. The roof leaked snow through several cracks, leaving little white piles across the rough wooden floor. Every blanket she owned was wrapped around her 8-year-old daughter Emma, who slept quietly beneath shaking breaths, her small cheeks pale from the bitter cold. Clara stared into the empty stove without moving. She had stopped crying long before the storm began. There were no tears left after spending the past 18 months fighting a battle she could never seem to win. Her husband, Thomas Bennett, had died after a wagon accident the previous spring. He had left behind a tiny cattle claim that had never produced enough money to support a family. Clara had sold nearly everything she owned just to survive through summer and autumn. First went the good horse, then the extra blankets. After that came her wedding china, her sewing machine, and finally most of the furniture. She had hidden every hardship from the neighbors. Whenever someone rode past, she smiled from the porch and told them everything was fine. Whenever the pastor visited, she thanked him politely but refused charity. Whenever people offered firewood or supplies, she found gentle reasons to say no. Her pride had become the last thing that truly belonged to her. Now even that pride could not warm her daughter. Emma slowly opened her tired blue eyes. "Mama, I'm here, sweetheart. I'm cold." Clara forced a smile that hurt more than tears. "I know. Will the fire come back?" "It will." She prayed the little lie would somehow become true. Emma closed her eyes again, trusting her mother completely. Clara looked toward the window where nothing could be seen except blowing snow. The storm had buried every path leading down the mountain. Even if she wanted help now, nobody could possibly reach them. Or so she believed. Less than a mile away, Nathan Cole stood outside his own ranch house holding a steaming cup of coffee. The tall, widowed rancher followed the same habit every winter morning. Before feeding his cattle, he always looked across the neighboring hills. Not because he enjoyed the view. Because lonely places could become deadly places overnight. His wife had died from fever 3 winters earlier. Ever since then, Nathan had quietly watched over the scattered ranches near his land without making much of it. He never believed neighbors should interfere in one another's lives. But he believed even less in ignoring danger. That morning his eyes stopped on the Bennett cabin. The chimney was dark. He frowned. Perhaps the fire had simply burned low. He finished feeding his horses before looking again. Still no smoke. His stomach tightened. The Bennett cabin always had smoke during winter mornings, even if only a little. He waited another hour. Nothing. The wind grew stronger. Nathan looked toward the mountain one last time. "No," he muttered quietly. He walked straight to the barn. Within minutes, his strongest draft horse pushed through snow nearly reaching its chest. Nathan carried blankets, dry firewood, lantern oil, food, and a heavy axe tied behind the saddle. The trip normally took 20 minutes. That day it took almost 2 hours. Twice the horse nearly lost its footing beneath hidden snowbanks. Once Nathan had to climb down and chop through a fallen pine, blocking the narrow trail. More than once he wondered if he was already too late. By the time the lonely cabin appeared through the blowing snow, the silence around it frightened him more than the storm itself. No smoke. No footprints. No sound. Nathan jumped from his horse and hurried toward the porch. The front door would not open. Snow had frozen it shut. He pounded hard. "Mrs. Bennett." Nothing. He hit the door again. "Clara." Only the wind answered. His heartbeat raced. He stepped back once before driving his shoulder against the frozen wood. The old door cracked but held. Again, the frame splintered. One final blow sent it crashing inward. An icy wave rolled out of the cabin. Inside, it was colder than the air outside. Nathan froze. The stove held nothing but gray ashes. The room looked almost empty. Furniture had been chopped apart for firewood. Shelves stood bare. A single chair was missing half its legs. Then he saw the bed. Clara lay beneath every blanket she owned, holding Emma tightly against her chest. Neither of them moved. Nathan crossed the room in 3 long steps. His hands shook as he touched Emma's forehead. Cold. Far too cold. Then he felt the faintest breath. Relief hit him so hard he nearly dropped to his knees. They're alive. Clara slowly opened her eyes. It took several seconds before she recognized the stranger standing above her. Nathan, you can still hear me. She nodded weakly. You shouldn't have come. Nathan almost laughed from the disbelief of hearing those words. You've got no fire. She looked toward the empty stove. I know. You've got no wood. I know. You've got no food. Her eyes filled with quiet shame. I know. Nathan looked around the freezing cabin once. He understood everything without another word. Every piece of missing furniture. Every empty shelf. Every crack in the roof. Every silent lie she had been telling the whole valley for months. You should have asked somebody. She lowered her eyes. I couldn't. Nathan did not argue. There was no time. He wrapped Emma carefully inside 2 thick wool blankets before lifting the little girl into his arms. Then he turned toward Clara. She tried to stand. Her legs collapsed instantly. I'm fine. No, you're not. I can walk. You can't. I don't want to be trouble. Nathan looked directly into her tired eyes. His voice stayed calm. So help me, Clara. If you're worried about pride while your daughter freezes, then we'll argue about it after both of you are alive. For the first time in nearly a year, Clara finally broke. Tears rolled silently down her frozen cheeks. I tried. Nathan simply nodded. I know. He carried Emma outside first before returning for Clara. She protested only once. My cabin. Nathan glanced around the empty room. It'll still be here when spring comes. He wrapped his own heavy winter coat around her shoulders. She looked at him with embarrassment. The town will talk. Nathan helped her onto the horse before climbing behind her, so Emma stayed safely between them beneath the blankets. Snow continued falling around them. Nathan gathered the reins. Then, in the middle of that frozen mountain, he spoke words Clara Bennett would remember for the rest of her life. I've got room by the fire. She closed her eyes. He continued. And I don't care who talks. Nathan Cole's ranch house sat in a sheltered valley where thick pine trees blocked much of the bitter wind. Smoke rolled steadily from the wide stone chimney, and warm light glowed through every window. By the time Nathan guided the exhausted horse into the yard, the snow had already begun covering their tracks behind them. His ranch hands hurried from the barn. Mr. Cole. Help me, Nathan called, the little girl first. Within moments, Emma was carried inside while Nathan carefully lifted Clara from the saddle. She tried to stand on her own feet, but her knees refused to hold her. I'm all right, she whispered. Nathan answered without looking at her. You've said that 3 times today. And it wasn't true once. She lowered her head. Inside the house, the warmth almost hurt after so many hours in the freezing cabin. The great stone fireplace filled the room with orange light, and thick logs burned so brightly that Clara had to shield her eyes for a moment. Emma lay sleeping beneath heavy quilts on a comfortable bed near the fire. A gray-haired doctor named Samuel Hayes was already checking the little girl's breathing. Nathan had sent one of his ranch hands to fetch him before riding toward the mountain. The old doctor looked up. "You made it just in time." He wrapped another blanket around Emma. "Another night up there, and I couldn't have saved either one." Nathan quietly nodded. He already suspected as much. Dr. Hayes examined Clara next before giving her a cup of hot broth. "No solid food yet. Just warmth. And rest." Clara held the bowl with trembling hands. She could barely speak. "Thank you." The doctor smiled kindly. "Don't thank me. Thank the stubborn rancher who refused to mind his own business." Nathan looked away, embarrassed. The doctor chuckled before gathering his bag. "They'll recover, but only if they stay warm. I'll check again tomorrow." After the doctor left, silence filled the room. Only the crackling fire could be heard. Emma slept peacefully for the first time in many days. Clara watched the flames with tears slowly filling her eyes. She had forgotten how warm a real fire could feel. Nathan quietly added another log. "You should sleep." "I can't." "Why?" She stared into the fire. "Because I'll have to leave tomorrow." Nathan looked at her. "No." She blinked. "No. You heard me. My cabin has no roof. My land will still be there. I can't stay in your house." "You can. The town won't like it." Nathan shrugged. "The town survives being unhappy." She looked down. "I'm a widow." "I know. You're a widower." "I know that too. People will think." "They usually do." His calm answer almost made her laugh. Almost. The next morning, Emma woke smiling for the first time in weeks. She smelled fresh bread baking in the kitchen. "Mama, I'm here." Nathan's housekeeper, Martha Reed, entered carrying warm oatmeal. "Good morning, sweetheart." Emma looked around carefully. "Are we in heaven?" Martha laughed softly. "No, but you've reached somewhere much warmer." Emma smiled sleepily before eating every spoonful. Nathan watched from across the room. Only then did he realize how hungry the little girl truly had been. By afternoon, Clara felt strong enough to stand. She immediately reached for her coat. Nathan noticed. "What are you doing?" "I'm going home." He stared at her. "Home? My cabin? The one with no fire?" "I'll manage." Nathan walked to the window. Outside, another storm had already begun. Snow covered everything once again. "You won't even reach it." "I have to try." "No." She frowned. "You can't stop me." "I can." She folded her arms. "How?" He turned back toward her. "Because Emma isn't going." Clara's face changed instantly. "What?" Nathan's voice stayed gentle. "I'll never force you to stay. If your pride tells you to walk back into that freezing cabin, I won't tie you to a chair. But your daughter stays here." Clara stared at him. "You can't mean that." "I do. I won't let a child freeze because her mother feels embarrassed." The words struck harder than any anger could have. Clara slowly sat back down. She covered her face with both hands. "I've spent a year pretending I didn't need help." Nathan nodded. "I noticed. I thought if I accepted charity, you'd lose something." She looked at him. "Yes." Nathan quietly placed another log onto the fire. "My father used to tell me something." She waited. "He said accepting kindness doesn't make a person weak. Refusing it until someone dies does." Clara looked toward the flames. She had no answer. By the end of the week, She began helping around the ranch simply because sitting still made her uncomfortable. She baked bread. She mended torn shirts. She swept the floors. She repaired curtains that had been hanging crooked for years. Nathan never asked her to do any of it. Yet each evening another small job had quietly been finished. Emma quickly became friends with Nathan's 2 children. 10-year-old Luke showed her the horses. Little Grace followed Clara everywhere she went. The lonely ranch house slowly became louder. Children laughed again. Music returned after supper. Fresh bread filled rooms that had smelled only of coffee and smoke since Nathan's wife had died. Without planning it, Clara had carried life back into the house. The gossip began before Christmas. It always did in a place as small as Red Creek. The first visitor arrived carrying a pie that nobody had requested. Mrs. Holloway smiled politely at Clara before speaking privately with Nathan on the porch. "It's generous what you're doing." Nathan nodded. "They'll leave when spring comes." She lowered her voice. "People are talking. They've got mouths. It isn't proper." Nathan leaned against the porch railing. "What isn't?" "A widow living here. With your children. Under your roof." Nathan looked across the snowy valley before answering. "When I found Clara and Emma, they were lying beside an empty stove. There wasn't a stick of wood left. They were hours from dying." Mrs. Holloway looked uncomfortable. "I know." "No," Nathan answered quietly. "I don't think you do. If I hadn't looked toward that chimney, there would have been 2 graves waiting when the snow melted." The older woman remained silent. Nathan continued. "Tell me, which is more improper? A widow staying beside my fireplace, or letting her freeze because someone might gossip?" Mrs. Holloway looked down. "I suppose when you say it that way, it's the only way worth saying." She sighed. "But people will keep talking." Nathan smiled for the first time that day. "Then let them. I've got enough firewood for everyone." But only 2 people needed it. Mrs. Holloway quietly left without another word. Unfortunately, she also carried Nathan's answer straight back into town. Within days, nearly everyone in Red Creek had heard exactly what he had said. Some admired him. Others criticized him. Several claimed he should send Clara somewhere else. Anywhere else. Nathan never argued with any of them. Every morning, he simply brought another armful of wood into the house. Every evening, he made sure the fire never burned low. Every night, Emma fell asleep smiling. One snowy evening, Nathan returned from checking cattle earlier than usual. As he stepped through the front door, he stopped. The house smelled of fresh cinnamon bread. Children were laughing in the kitchen. Grace was helping Clara roll pie dough. Luke and Emma were building little wooden animals beside the fireplace. For the first time since losing his wife 3 years earlier, his house sounded like a home again. Nathan stood silently in the doorway longer than he realized. Clara noticed first. "You've been standing there nearly a minute." He smiled awkwardly. "I forgot this place could sound like this." She looked around at the children. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Clara whispered, "I'm sorry if we've taken over your home." Nathan slowly shook his head. "You didn't." He watched the children laughing together beside the fire. "I think you brought it back." The snow finally began to melt in early March. Small streams appeared beneath the white hills, and muddy wagon tracks slowly replaced the frozen roads. Families who had spent months shut inside their homes finally gathered again in the little church and the general store. With spring came warmer weather. It also brought louder gossip. The people of Red Creek had spent the entire winter talking about Nathan Cole and the widow living beneath his roof. Some admired him. Others whispered every time his name was mentioned. One man refused to let the matter die. His name was Harold Mercer. He was one of the church elders, respected for his wealth and his loud opinions. Harold believed rules mattered more than kindness, and he had decided Nathan's household had become an example of everything wrong with the town. During the first church meeting after winter, Harold stood before everyone. "We cannot pretend nothing improper happened this winter." The room became quiet. A widow lived in an unmarried man's house for 3 months. It sends the wrong message. Several people shifted uneasily. Nathan remained seated near the back beside Clara and the children. Harold continued, "If we overlook this, what example are we setting?" No one answered. Finally, Nathan stood. He spoke so calmly that everyone listened. "May I ask one question?" Harold nodded. "Go ahead." Nathan looked around the room. "How many of you checked on Clara Bennett after the first blizzard?" Silence. "How many looked toward her chimney?" Nobody raised a hand. "How many rode to her cabin?" Still nothing. Nathan nodded slowly. "I did." He looked directly at Harold. "When I reached her house, there was no fire, no food, no wood. The furniture had already been burned. I found Clara and Emma lying in bed beneath every blanket they owned. They were only hours from dying." The church became completely still. Nathan's voice never rose. "If I had turned around because I was afraid people might gossip, today we'd be standing over 2 graves." He paused before speaking again. "You keep talking about appearances. I keep remembering an 8-year-old girl asking her mother if the fire would come back. You tell me which matters more." No one moved. Harold tried again. "But people still have standards." Nathan nodded. "So do I. My standard is simple. If someone is freezing, I open my door. If someone is hungry, I feed them. If someone needs warmth, I share my fire. I've got room by the fire. And I still don't care who talks." His quiet words carried through the church more powerfully than shouting ever could. Before Harold could answer, another voice spoke. It belonged to Dr. Samuel Hayes. The old doctor slowly stood. "I examined Clara and Emma the day Nathan brought them home. They were dying. That isn't an opinion. That's a fact." He looked around the church. "If Nathan had waited until it looked proper, I would have buried them both." Several people lowered their eyes. Mrs. Holloway stood next. "So did I. I visited that house during winter. I expected to find scandal. What I found was 4 children laughing together. A widow earning her place by working from sunrise until bedtime. And a man asking for nothing except that nobody freeze." One by one others began speaking. The blacksmith, the schoolteacher, the doctor, even families who had bought Clara's sewing after winter ended. Everyone told the same story. She had worked honestly. Nathan had never hidden anything. The house had simply been filled with warmth. Harold suddenly realized the room was no longer standing behind him. It was standing behind them. He quietly gathered his hat and left without another word. The gossip ended that day. Not because people stopped talking, but because they finally knew the whole truth. As spring warmed the valley, Clara returned to her cabin for the first time. Nathan rode with her. The little house looked even smaller now. The broken roof had partly collapsed. Snow had ruined most of what remained inside. Clara walked through the empty doorway slowly. She touched the cold stove, then the broken chair she had chopped apart for firewood. She remembered every hopeless night, every silent prayer, every lie she had told people when they asked if she needed help. Nathan waited quietly outside. After several minutes, she stepped back into the sunshine. "I don't think I can live here again." Nathan nodded. "I understand." She smiled sadly. "I thought this place was all I had left." "It isn't." They returned to the ranch together. Over the next several weeks, Clara began sewing again. Martha found old fabric stored in the attic. Nathan built her a sturdy quilting frame beside the large front window. Soon neighbors started asking if she could repair blankets. Then quilts. Then wedding gifts. Her careful stitches became famous across 3 counties. For the first time since losing her husband, Clara earned enough money to stand completely on her own. Nathan never touched a single dollar. One warm evening in late April, he rode into town carrying a small wooden box. Inside rested a simple gold ring. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Just honest. Like the man carrying it. That evening, he found Clara sitting on the porch watching the children play together. Luke was teaching Emma how to fish beside the creek. Grace chased butterflies while laughing louder than Nathan had heard since her mother died. Nathan sat beside Clara. For several moments, they simply watched. Finally, he spoke. "I've been waiting." She looked at him. "For what?" "For spring." She smiled softly. "It's spring." "I know. I promised myself something during winter." "What?" "I wouldn't ask you anything while you depended on me. You deserved a real choice." He reached into his pocket. "You have your own business now. Your own money. You could buy another house. You could move to another county. You don't need me." Clara looked at him quietly. Nathan opened the little wooden box. "I don't want you to stay because I rescued you. I want you to stay because somewhere between that first snowfall and today, this stopped feeling like only my home." He looked toward the children. "They've become a family. So have we. I've got room by the fire. But I'd like that fire to belong to both of us." He took a slow breath. "Will you marry me?" Clara covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. "You waited until I could say no." Nathan nodded. "I had to. I never wanted gratitude. I wanted your heart." She laughed through her tears. "You already had it." She took his hands gently. "The morning you broke down my frozen door. You saw a chimney without smoke. Everyone else saw a lonely widow. You saw someone worth saving." She smiled. "And somewhere after that, you became someone worth loving." "Yes, Nathan. I'll marry you." The children noticed first. Emma ran across the yard shouting. Mama said yes. Luke laughed so hard he nearly fell into the creek. Grace hugged Clara so tightly everyone laughed together. The wedding took place beneath a large oak tree outside the ranch house in early June. Nearly the entire town attended. Even people who had once criticized Nathan came carrying gifts. Dr. Hayes stood proudly in the front row. Mrs. Holloway cried through nearly the whole ceremony. Only one chair remained empty. Harold Mercer chose not to come. Nobody seemed to notice. As the preacher finished the ceremony, Nathan looked at his new wife. "You remember what I told you that day on the mountain?" Clara smiled. "I remember every word." He squeezed her hand. "I still don't care who talks." She laughed. "Neither do I." Years later, visitors often asked why the Cole Ranch always seemed warmer than every other place in the valley. Some believed it was the huge stone fireplace. Others thought it was Clara's famous quilts covering every bed. But the children knew the real answer. It wasn't the fire. It wasn't the blankets. It wasn't even the house. It was the choice one lonely rancher made on a snowy morning when he looked toward a silent chimney instead of looking away. Because kindness had opened one door. Love had simply decided never to close it.